And thank you for making time to join with us, especially when the U.S. Senate had the audacity to counter-program. Year 2018 marks my 20th year in mobile. When I got started, it wasn't even called mobile, it was called wireless, and that wasn't nearly as exciting. But mobile has become the undeniable cornerstone of this evolution of digital and digital marketing. Understanding how to navigate this environment, as well as what a client's business actually is nothing short of a modern-day necessity. Healthcare and pharma marketing are perfect examples of that. For years now, I've said that after working with J&J, bring on any government agency in the world. But, now I say that in jest, but one way or another in pharma, all roads lead to the FDA, or at minimum, attorney review, and I'm pretty sure everybody in the room can appreciate that component. For advertising, this means how do you express fair balance information inside comparably smaller digital ad units, while still satisfying your market and getting your marketing message across? How do you satisfy your commercial and regulatory arms at the same time, while using these great new advertising tools and digital media? And how do you leverage this advanced marketing data without violating any sort of PII? So marketing in this environment requires a great deal of understanding, balance, and creativity, and a good amount of determination with which to cross those legal waters. But the opportunity to reach your potential client, your customer, your patient at the end, in the flow of their daily lives, with information that's critical to them, is just too powerful. So today we have three panelists who are here to help illuminate the different aspects of healthcare marketing. So going down the line, Nikzad Allahverdi, how'd I do? Okay, just checking. John Kagan and Ted Lawson of Endo Pharmaceuticals. So one of the things, to get started, I've spoken to each of you separately, is there's a commonality that the consumers don't need you guys until they need you. And that's probably not true for most of pharma as well as much of healthcare. So does that mean that search is the top of your funnel consistently?
So search, whether you believe it or not, it's both the top and the bottom of the funnel. Courtesy of the FDA, we've had to change our ways we approach media. A lot of us run unbranded sites and run search. When you start, and we start targeting you before you've gone to the doctor, before you've gotten that diagnosis, and we say, hey, you're having a little trouble. Why don't you come to this website? And we'll start targeting you that way. We'll start focusing on your conditions through keywords, unbranded ad copy that doesn't look pharma related. And then as you kind of progress and then go to the doctor for your diagnosis, we then change out our ad copy, our web domain, everything. And kind of just, and what we're there to do essentially is help pull you through the patient journey, or the top of the funnel all the way down to the bottom of the funnel when you're at the very bottom trying to research the brand of prescription that you've just received. So it's not necessarily the top or the bottom, it's enclosed in the whole way, it's just how we fit into it.
Ted, you have a very specific product going for a very specific audience. Is search the necessity? Is it your first go-to?
It is. So what we did a couple of years, or last year actually, we did some pretty in-depth patient journey research in the B12 market for the bariatric space. So if you can imagine a bariatric patient that's had surgery, they've had a partial or full removal of their stomach, they no longer can absorb B12 naturally, right? So they have to have a way to get B12 that bypasses the GI tract. So what we learned in that research is they start researching their surgery in that procedure very early on, sometimes years before they actually get to a surgeon or a surgery center to have the procedure done. So for us, search is important because we know that they're looking early, and what they need to learn early is about the nutrition options, right? So for us, it's B12. So it's a critical part of the journey for us on the patient side.
So the ability to insert your brand, even while somebody is concerned about the very surgery that they're going, you guys are the secondary component, but you want to be inserted right in the beginning. Right
at the beginning, because every bariatric surgery patient is going to need to be on a B12 therapy for life. So we want to be there from the very beginning.
Now, Nikzad, you guys have had a revolution in search, so to speak.
Yeah, so senior living isn't really something that you research in your free time. It's not something that you really look for until you have a need for it. So we do very heavily rely on search. But then once we do, once they do come in and get to the site and start to poke around, most of what we do is sort of like holding their hand down the sales funnel, I like to say. So helping them try to figure out how to have those tough conversations, how to make those tough decisions, and it just feel like they're not so overwhelmed, because it is a very overwhelming time in a person's life when they have to start looking for you know, a place to put their mom, you know, or their father, or whoever it may be. The combination of really not having any existing knowledge about what senior living is, and then the emotional side of it really makes it so that we have to, you know, both work on the organic side, but also, you know, stuff like email nurture campaigns to try to get them to figure out how to have those tough conversations.
Okay, I mean, and considering we're about plus 3 years, give or take, where Google made everybody take their medicine, saying search is on desktop, it's on mobile, it's on a tablet, you don't get to choose anymore, it's just search, search. Where does mobile fall into that overall equation? So we've got the media of search, but where do you find people engaging using a mobile device? Is it right after they get bad news?
Well, I mean, I personally think that the mobile device is obviously becoming the first place they go, right? It's the easiest, the most convenient. And as a matter of fact, right now, we're actually retooling our 4 websites for our brand because they weren't mobile friendly. They were developed years ago, before that was really the norm. And so just this week, we went through the MARC review, our med legal regulatory review process, which we have to do for everything. We watered them way down, and we approved them, right? So, but I think we're going to be in a much better place moving forward, having a mobile-friendly, or actually optimized for mobile platform in 2019.
So a point of clarity is 3 or 4 years ago, Google made us bite the bullet and say you can't have mobile, desktop, tablet. They actually reverted that about 1.5 years ago. They'd make it tricky. They won't tell you, but any search operation that's worth their weight knows how to do it. And so what we've discovered is mobile, yes, mobile is our highest source of traffic volume these days, but it also heavily depends on the demographic. What we also discovered with mobile is it's a sense of immediacy. Oh no, I'm not feeling good. Oh no, I'm having trouble breathing. Oh no, I might have diabetes. So what we find is it's a shorter tail, broader search, higher up the funnel when it comes to mobile. And then when we actually get down to the research phase, they often move to desktop or tablet. So we kind of adjust our strategies and how we target people with what keywords to buy a device going forward.
Yeah, and for us, it's kind of difficult because, again, you don't do any research into senior living usually until you need it. And when you do the research, it's not a single session thing. You know, you got to go, you got to do the research. You're looking at a few communities in your area probably, or what's on the way to work, or whatever's convenient. And you might make the decision across 4, 5, 6, or 7 sessions. So we see, and you might even pick up the phone and call when all said and done. You might not even submit a form online. So a lot of times, because there's so much thought that has to go into it, we see a lot of people doing the research on like a tablet, or for instance, like if there's a fall, if there's some sort of event that happens that sort of snaps it into focus that, okay, I got to look for something now. Usually people will be in the hospital, and so we've had some middling success with like geofencing. So trying to target people when they're actually in the hospital, sitting in the waiting room, because that's the time when they're thinking about it. That's the time when it's top of mind. And so we try to just make sure that we're optimized across the board, tablet, phone, whatever it is, it's a mix in terms of where we see the actual conversions, so it's hard to say.
Yeah, so now we're back to, as you're trying to market in different ways, you talk about multiple touch points across multiple platforms, which that's a lot to put on any marketer who's first trying to jump into this, whether we want to call it consumer, whether we want to call it patient advertising. Do you have to become an expert on day one, or can you start farming out some of that expertise to bring it in to get smarter?
Well, for a good example, this year we partnered with CMI Media on our non-personal platform for a couple of reasons. One, I'm on a smaller brand, don't have huge budgets. Was able to come to an agreement and work on what's called a gain share program, so it was mutually beneficial for us. But it allowed me, I'm not a complete expert in all digital, to partner with a company that is an expert in something digital and beyond. Right? It was a multifaceted, kind of a surround sound approach to non-personal promotion, where we did everything from your traditional direct mail and banner advertising to very specifically targeted emails, and had a tremendous amount of success with that in this year.
So to try to reframe that, because the first time when we spoke about this, I had to let you tell me twice. So essentially that you've gotten a media company to come in with you and partner, as opposed to just being a client of theirs, and they'll take on some risk, but they also share in the reward.
Correct. So rather than doing everything fee for service like we would traditionally do, we set up a very stringent test and control group. So we would target the test group with all of the non-personal tactics, and then leave the control group agnostic to all of those tactics, right? And then we would measure the upside at the end of each quarter, and we would split the upside. So while I was responsible for the creative and creating the asset, they took on the responsibility of the cost associated with all of the delivery, printing, everything else that went along with that. So it was a great partnership, and it's worked very well.
Okay, so they'll bring the target into the equation, and well, some of it is traditional media, some of it is digital media as well, right?
That's correct.
I mean, I'm a little bit biased just being on the agency side, so I make my bread and butter off you all farming it out to us. But client side or brand side, agency side, the reality is, yes, you can learn it along the way, but by the time your team has learned it, you've fallen way behind and you're not competing for a #1 spot or a #4 spot. You're an afterthought is the reality. I've been saying this for years, the most important thing you can ever have for any digital operation is the people and the talent. If you want, and you can't really survive in the space without a good multi-touch attribution modeling, especially when it comes to healthcare and pharma, because you're trying to do each touch point. So the biggest thing I say is if you can't find someone, some geographic restraints and most common reason, to run it, like a simple data scientist or an advanced analytics, then you have to start looking to outsource and going possibly to an agency or a one-off freelancer with a reputable or with a good reputation in the space. You can, like I said, you can learn it. By the time you've learned it, you have fallen too far behind that.
So that'd be, hold on, so far that's 2 votes of you need to farm out at least a good portion of it in order to be able to stay competitive.
You can farm it out. So the reality is if you're not in one of the major metros that are digital hubs, your Californias, your Austin, Boston, Chicago, New York, Philly, you're probably going to have to farm it out. If you're in one of these major metros, you throw out the right dollar amount, money talks, and you can get the right talent. That's just the reality. But if you're not, then you start running into problems. And I've dealt with healthcare clients for 10 years. Almost everyone wants someone on site. And that's part of the problem is if you can't have them on site and you don't live in a desirable area, you're not going to be able to hire that talent in-house.
Because historically for the pharma industry, we've seen them, they want to bring everything back in-house, they want to farm everything out, they want to bring it back in-house. And reality is, I think you probably need a balance of both. I agree with what you're saying. You want real expertise of the advanced stuff. You're going to need people on the outside to keep you on that, right on the crest of that wave. But at the same time, for the bread and butter, you can start bringing it back in-house. For example, stuff like Facebook is becoming incredibly popular for healthcare companies. I'm with the wrong conference. Healthcare companies to start bringing back in-house because they want more control over it. But at the same time, they end up missing out on perhaps some of the advanced features that Facebook could potentially offer them.
So one of the big things that we always recommend is if you insist on having some degree of it in-house, farm out the sausage making, farm out the hands-on analytic attribution modeling, but make sure you have someone in-house that's smart enough to know how to interpret this data, translate this data, and call the farmed out operation on their BS. Are you good? Are you not? Is this real or not? Because I mean, I've been doing this for almost 15 years. There is a lot of hacks in our industry. That's just our reality. So the key is finding the right ones and making sure someone who can identify the right one.
All right, Nikzad gets the final word on this because he's the one that runs right on the fence. You have both sides where you guys have developed an in-house marketing team, significantly so, and you've been there for most of it, right?
Yeah, I've been at 5-star. It's going to be 7 years in October, so yeah.
So you've got some of it, but then you farm some of it out as well.
Yeah, so it's overall, I would have to say we farm it out, and I rely heavily on people like John. And part of that is because about 4 years ago, we made a real shift to a sales culture, a more sales-centered culture. So our current VP of Sales and Marketing, Rob Poyes, came in from Starwood, and it was a bit of a shift from what people had known before. It was a lot of local commercials on not public access, but local TV or local news channels reaching out and saying, hey, we can do a paid search campaign for you. You'll have crazy results. And then they send them to me, and it's just like, why are you wasting your money? And we have you pay for this almost already, because we work with people like John on the corporate level. And the other thing is, with that shift, a lot of the things that we had just assumed as givens about senior living, we had to sort of shift. Like we hadn't done retargeting really, or we'd done paid search, but with middling results here and there. So. Trying all these new approaches is it's just trying to get your footing, see what works, see what doesn't, because with that shift, everything everything sort of changed. But in terms of things like Facebook, I have a small team, so it's difficult to say, but we're finding that it's in our best interest to have the people, team members of the communities actually run their own Facebook pages. There's something about that, that direct contact, or knowing that you're speaking or commenting on a post by somebody who's actually at the community and cares about your aunt so and so or whoever it is. It really makes a big difference in making people feel secure about the decision that they made and where they put their loved one.
Makes sense. And because I love your thing about you have to hold their hand down the funnel, and it really makes a lot of sense, especially because you're not selling to the person who would be buying themselves. You're selling to somebody else that's in their family.
Yeah, so it's sort of split. So we have independent living, which is like lowest level of care, and I like to think of that as like a glorified condo where you have happy hour, they shovel for you, they have speakers come in, all sorts of activities, and you're around people, the same age as you, you're with your peers. So for that sales process can be 2-3 years, because maybe you're living in Minnesota and you have to sell your car and your house, and you want to move to Florida or wherever it may be. But then on the other hand, if you're in any of the other lines of business that we have, or service lines that we have, assisted living, Alzheimer's care, or skilled nursing, those are not something that you're going to be looking for yourself. It's usually the adult daughter's the decision maker, and whether or not it's divided up between the siblings or whoever it may be, it's usually that adult daughter. So,
and at the same time, what I think is interesting is for any type of advertising you're doing, you have to show the person that's in the living situation, but you have to show them 10 to 15 years younger.
Yeah. So we found that there's a very immediate. There's like a snap judgment that happens in people's minds. So if it's an independent living resident, for instance, let's say they're 75 or so, and they're trying to figure out where they want to go, and they're poking around, and they go on our website, or they see an ad somewhere, and if we show them somebody that is the same age as them, they have a visceral reaction like, that's not me, I'm not that old, I'm much more spry and young than that. So we find ourselves having to find people that are probably 15 years younger than our target, or the average age of our residents, to make sure that we don't put them off by making it seem like they're a place where all those stereotypes that exist about assisted living communities where people are unattended, sitting in a wheelchair in a corner. You know what I mean?
So you've got average age is 82, and you're advertising it with a 67-year-old.
Essentially, yeah.
You feel spry, which is pretty funny because the word spry is never used for anybody under the age of 65.
Yeah, ride around on tandem bicycles, and all sorts of stuff like that.
For sure. Now, when you start putting together audiences, Ted, and I'll start with you because you're looking for a very specific audience, and you have to sell through physicians primarily, right?
Right.
How do you start developing who those audiences are, and how do you effectively go target them?
So there's really two sides to our business, right? There's the bariatric side, which is what you're speaking of, right? Which is very specific. The nice thing about the bariatric side of our business, it's a niche, and we fit very well there. And not only do they get a prescription B12 medication, but for the bariatric patient, they have to be on a host of other vitamins and minerals that are required by the ASMBS for them. It's chronic, right? So we provide them their prescription B12, but we also bundle that with a multivitamin of calcium and iron. So the way we target that in that patient journey, once that patient identifies the surgery center or the surgeon that they're going to use for their surgery, they go through a 3 to 6 month process before they actually have the surgery that's defined largely by managed care. And in that process, they're going to have a touch point with a bariatric coordinator, a dietitian, and the surgeon. So with any given office, we identify where in that process is the best place to introduce our program, and then we insert the program at that point based on each individual office. So it's not a one size fits all. It really depends on how the office processes the patient. Normally, it's with what you expect, the dietitian. They have a first or second consult, and they have the introduction to their vitamin minerals and what they're going to need for basically the rest of their lives. And we try to insert ourselves there. That's the most efficient. The other side of that is our sales force, while small, is pretty nimble, and they actually attend what we call pre-op meetings, where it'd be a meeting similar to this, right? And there might be 20 or 40 patients that are going to have bariatric surgery in the next 6 to months to 6 weeks, and we present the program there. That's the most successful place to do it because we have control, but it's obviously not the most efficient.
From a tactical standpoint, the B12 inhalers, that's your primary component you're selling, but they need all these vitamins and minerals. You're selling those too, right? It's not like, and if you act now, we'll throw in a second dosage of, right?
No, it's one program, one package of what they get. So it's not really a sale, it's more of a free good.
Okay. And now, John, your specialty is being able to pluck the right audiences out from a larger marketplace as opposed to the old school shotgun spray and pray approach. How are you going about building separate audiences for different types of products?
So there's a couple ways we go about it, and what we do is we try and join it together all. What the nice thing we can ever have is not starting a site from scratch, so we can actually pull demographic data, likes, interests, household income, gender, race, etc., and start pulling that data together through back-end analytics. Then what we also do is we go to the brand. So I had a Medicare client. What we did was we started looking at their back-end data, saying this is the age of the person researching. This is for the actual target that they're eligible for. And then we started joining these together and kind of we had to take some liberty and say, all right, this individual is probably very big on sports. This one is more likely to be a stay-at-home mom, stuff to this degree. Start marrying this data together. And then what we do is we build audience segmentation lists and say, all right, you have to hit X, Y, Z criteria because you're going to get a very specific message. And we'll do a control and then a tailored messaging or copy, if you will, for each individual to see which kind of pushes forward, and then we continue to do that. But we've discovered is what separates digital from traditional is, as you say, we're not spray and pray. We might not reach as many eyes, but we're going to reach a higher volume of qualified eyes, and that's where ultimately is I have to put a price point on each individual that I reach. Say, all right, I need to get the right audience tailored down to X, Y, Z number so that we can actually hit our CPA targets for each acquisition of lead.
And when you're going down this road, do you find it, are you a tough sell into a pharmaceutical? We've seen pharma be very, very slow to engage in digital, which amongst other reasons is why the show has come to be. We're trying to continue to push this along in a smarter way. But my question for you is, you have to go into somebody who's been buying print, and been buying radio, and been buying even local TV, not local TV, not public access, different. But they've been buying all this stuff all of these years. Is it hard for you to sell it into them as an idea?
So the way we do it is, it's not hard, we just have to make the case. What we're saying is, look, keep your TV, keep your print. You shouldn't get rid of it. We're not going to be able to 100% replace it. What we're saying is we're much more cost efficient. So instead of spending $5 on TV, spend $4.95 and give us that 5 cents to digital. We'll be able to supplement that and start showing, look, we can reach an audience. Honestly, traditional print, radio, TV, it still feeds down to the digital media. If you got the money, which some of the bigger pharma companies do, or some of the bigger healthcare companies, we can start doing a cross-trying of traditional media and digital media together and say, look, they all work symbiotically, and we can finally understand who's reaching what, and it helps us influence our decisions later. So the big thing is, it's not hard to get them to buy in, it's hard to get them to deviate some of the dollars and say, look, we're going to help. You don't need to take 20% of your budget away. You need to take 1% of your budget away and let me work with it.
So if I can sum that all up, I would say digital, great enhancement to traditional media.
Bingo.
I would say it is significantly, and I would use the word cheaper option than buying more stuff.
Cost efficient.
Cheaper. And but there is a balance to be able to do both, especially when you're talking about a new medication that might have cost $750 million to $1 billion to develop. You think they could throw a couple cents your way in order to be able to test this stuff out in a very precise way, right?
Yeah.
Nikzad, now you guys are doing stuff that is, we're going to call it more cutting edge, especially for senior living. You guys are doing more with, sure, take that, we'll go from there. You guys are experimenting a lot with video now.
Yeah, so with that shift, we started to look at all different sorts of media. So at first taking stock of what was being used, so radio spots, TV spots, the shotgun approach, as you said, and just trying other things out, seeing what would work. So we had there was a campaign that Chevy did called Day It Forward, where I think it was something like they'd give somebody like $1,000 to go and quote unquote pay it forward to anybody and record it and send it in, and they would promote it. So there was a YouTube personality, Mike Tompkins. He's like an a cappella singer, and he took the opportunity to take that money, and he took it to one of our communities in Tennessee, I believe. And he created one of those videos where people make like a popping sound with their noise or some sort of noise with their mouths, and then he splices them all together into some continuous song. And I think he did a video for the Democratic National Convention. Like, it was very similar to what we had done, but he did a video with the residents, recording the audio and then splicing it together into a song/video. But he also took the money from Chevy and sort of did a remodel of their TV room. So we saw that come through, and it had a lot of success. People really loved it, and so we partnered with him to do a series of videos for us. So we did, for the holidays mostly, so Thanksgiving, Valentine's Day, stuff like that. And we did another campaign, Older and Wiser. So very simple, just a camera in front of a couch, and then we had our residents come in and sort of give their life advice on certain topics. And so, we've been working that into pre-roll or Facebook, even Facebook advertising. Yeah, it's more like brand level, because it's hard to attribute a conversion or an actual phone call or a form submission to the work that we do with these videos, either on YouTube or wherever it may be. It's more brand level maintenance and trying to keep that faith or instill that faith in people that 5-Star knows what it's doing, and if you choose to move your loved one into a 5-Star community, you know that they'll be taken care of.
So you did social video with a YouTube influencer for an old age home, so to speak.
Yes.
Can we agree that that's pushing the envelope?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Because that is the more advanced stuff that we would see on traditional consumer brands trying to get their stuff in the flow of a consumer's everyday life. And here you are making these videos with somebody who you're paying, by the way. These guys don't do it out of the goodness of their heart.
Yeah.
You're paying them, they're creating these videos for you, and then you're repurposing them as YouTube spots that go pre-roll.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It sounds like you could be any product in the world.
I guess, yeah. It's nice to be, having come in before all of that, it's nice to see that change and sort of see that move into the cutting edge side. So it's been a fun ride over 7 years.
From our side, at Mella Media, we're constantly looking for examples out in the real world of campaigns that are, and we're going to be more specific, errors that are being done by either our clients' competitors or just other companies in general. And over the summer, we ran across one for Alleave. They ran a just short of horrible mobile campaign in partnership with Fandango, where the ads were all the wrong size, the print was too small, shoving fine print for a contest into a 300 by 50 ad. And all we could think of is, thank God they didn't have to put any fair balance language in there as well, because they would have just shoved it smaller and smaller. The consumer activation was way too long, especially for the mobile consumer, which has the attention span of a flea. Okay? And it was likely, you look at this and you just know this is an incredibly expensive endeavor that Bayer went down because they trusted their particular agency. What it showed to us most of all is, we've seen it over and over. Most agencies still don't know how to do mobile. But what we've seen more and more is that companies are still trying stuff, which is good, but they may be heading down the wrong road. So I guess my question to you guys is, what are some of the don'ts that you've come across in trying to execute campaigns? What are the ones that you feel like you've messed up on, potentially in-house, but try to remedy going forward? Ted, I'm looking at you.
I mean, for me, it's the easy. I think trying to put too much into one space, like similar to you're speaking about, and I think we're guilty of that as well. Even when it comes to basic digital campaigns on email, we try to put too much there. We're unfortunately so regulated that we have to water down a lot of what we say, a lot of the claims. You have to have the balance. So you're forced to have a lot of copy just by the nature of our business. But we try to get as many claims in there, which then duplicates the balance of the copy. So I think for me, probably one of the things I'm most guilty of is trying to put too much into one and try to get it all at once instead of trying to spread it out and do smaller messages over a more frequent basis.
And so it comes down to it's creativity, right? You've got to be smart about the words you can use and ones you can't use, right?
So I've been fortunate enough, knock on wood, to not have a catastrophe when it comes to healthcare pharma. Worst idea that we've ever done, the worst thing we ever had to execute on that was a client mandate was a Snapchat crown for a health insurance company. This was a couple years back. Terrible idea. I digress. Honestly, though, like I said, I've been fortunate. I haven't had a catastrophe, and that's because it's going to sound weird, but I believe in fear-based management for my team. Whenever I don't bring new people, new to the industry, new to the company, fresh out of college, onto a healthcare or pharma team. We are the most highly regulated in the country. Initial FDA fines start at $200,000, which is usually more than your retainer for your agency. My team, whenever you bring someone in for healthcare pharma, they should be immediately trained. Drexel and Villanova University offer great day classes on healthcare and pharmaceutical advertising rules and regulations. They will help certify you. Biggest way to avoid it and prevent, the biggest way to deal with the problem is prevent it before it happens. The best way to do that is education and say, look, if you screw up, it's going to cost you your job, if not a lot more for the company. And knock on wood, we haven't had these issues. A little grim, but that's reality.
So, grim's okay. Nikzad, what about you?
I mean, we're still finding our footing. Thankfully, we haven't had a catastrophe either. But with the nature of the sales cycle being as fragmented as it is, we just try to make the information available that will help them make the decision. We try to parcel it out into different packages, or just make sure that it's optimized so that whatever device they're looking on, it's something that they can read, that they can understand, and if they need to get in touch with somebody, they can click the button and place that call wherever they may be, because you never know. Holidays is another time when I gave the example of a hospital before, but holidays, maybe you go home for Thanksgiving, and you realize your mother hasn't been upstairs in 6 months. She physically can't, and so you get a spare moment. You might go out on the porch, and you do that quick search, and start the process there. So thankfully, no catastrophes. We're still finding our footing.
All right, John may have said he went grim, but you get the prize now for grim. Okay. Mom
Apologies.
Upstairs. Nice. But the nature of the products that you guys have to advertise for is rarely one touch done, right? It's not like they're searching for you, done, I want to buy and convert. How many times do you need to touch these people? And at the same time, if you're putting stuff out there, search is a pull mechanism where, let's say your video ads are more of a push. Are there other areas that are in between? Are you using banner ads but in different placements?
Yeah, we're doing it all. I mean, again, with the program we ran this year with CMI, it was multi-channel, multifaceted. I'll go back to mention something that was said earlier by John, and that is the one critical factor for me is, we have to kind of pick and choose in small pharma where we're going to have our capabilities in-house. And for me, the most important capability we've had for sure is our insights and analytics team, because they really do help you define and hone in on where you need to be spending those dollars and where you need to be targeting. So, we've kind of traded off at Endo in the past couple of years that digital capability for the insights capability. And coming from big pharma where you kind of take all that for granted and it's all kind of behind the scenes and it just kind of naturally happens, you really have to work for it in small pharma, and we've done a really good job at Endo of being able to do that. So we've been able to then take those insights and those analytics and really determine where we want to put banner advertisements, where we want to put the emails, where we want to put the direct mail, et cetera, so that we've had just that ability to touch people wherever they are and in a way that they want to be presented the data and the information.
John, what are you saying about how many times do you have to touch somebody? Well, how many times do they have to touch you, I guess? Yeah.
Didn't sound better.
Especially today. I shouldn't make those jokes today at all.
So honestly, it varies what it is. Whether it's health insurance, I do a lot of urgent clinics. I do various pharmaceuticals. Urgent clinics, honestly, it's one and done because, well, it's an emergency. Yeah, it's an emergency. It's usually one and done, mobile quickly, and then we are able to track them all the way to our clinic. I have one pharma client that is a Narcan naloxone, so their goal is to reverse overdoses. We can't proactively market for that because there's not enough markets out there that's an appropriate venue outside of like a Narcotics Anonymous or within the doctor's office. So it's a very reactive search-only scenario. And often when they get to you, it's one and done because it's often a sense of emergency. I do an epinephrine drug or for anaphylaxis or peanut allergies, a few will. The research is done by typically the mother. It's usually for their child under the age of 8, and we'll usually see 10 to 12 touch points before they convert, or before they come to lead. Health insurance, when we deal with that, we're looking at up to 90 days with probably about 15 to 20 different touch points. So it really comes, there's no simple answer, but unless you are dealing with an emergency-based scenario, it's going to be at least 5 to 6 touch points.
Steve's got a microphone, so I'm going to let, if you have a question, put your hand up, he'll come around to you, but I'm going to ask more in the meantime. So in general, we see healthcare has more data, arguably, than any other industry that's out there. You touch it, getting all this data in lots of different places. But there's always those, well, what can we use, what can't we use? And with so much opportunity in digital advertising as a whole, and the industry of healthcare, if I'm putting everything together, being lagging behind, why aren't we seeing more aggressive moves? Doesn't it seem like it's just screaming with opportunity?
It is, but I mean, in my opinion, it comes back down to our regulatory environment, right? So simple things like a Facebook page, right? I work with 2 different brands. I have an orphan disease drug it's in the pediatric space. And it's largely like you, it's a caregiver decision, right? It's not the patient. It's a child that's 4, 5, 6 years old in most cases. So they're obviously not going to make a treatment choice. Their parent is. And a Facebook page is the perfect opportunity to reach out to that community. But because of the regulatory environment, we just literally can't do it. So until we'll get there eventually. And I know many pharma companies are already using Facebook, and so we try to use precedent and all those things with our legal and regulatory team. But when you look at all the opportunities in the digital space that are out there today, our regulatory hurdles keep us, in my opinion, from getting there quickly. Not that we won't get there, it's just going to take time and trial and error before we're able to do it efficiently.
That makes sense. And just to highlight that point a step further, the gun-shy nature of the industry, we were supposed to have another panelist here today, and she was great. And she was brought in from outside the pharma industry to help rejuvenate kind of how aggressive they're being in digital marketing. And her bosses pulled her off the panel because they were afraid of the things which may or may not be coming out. Now, is the market as a whole 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or are we looking at 1 step forward, 2 steps back? Is everything just getting stuck?
I think it's the latter.
Because the FDA, the big panel sitting at the top, the FDA is scaring everybody that much?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say it's the FDA scaring everybody. I think it's just the nature of pharma and where we've been, and the CIAs that are in place and the fines that have been levied, and the risk now to getting a warning letter or a fine, and what that means to the overall business is sometimes greater than the return for doing something kind of cutting edge or new and exciting.
So then, how do we get past that?
So, yeah, just to kind of piggyback on this, the FDA is one of our problems. The other problem is, especially for pharma and hospitals, it's very difficult to proactively advertise for some of this without violating someone's privacy. So last thing, I worked on GlaxoSmithKline for years. For some reason, I got stuck with the icky things for HIV, herpes, and incontinence. I can't proactively advertise onto someone's computer on one of their browsers off a behavioral metric if someone's been looking at that stuff, and then their kid comes on or their spouse comes on. There's a huge privacy scenario that we have to also adjust with. Sometimes it's appropriate. A lot of the time, especially in pharma, it's not, because it starts to come into a degree of privacy violations. And the last thing you need is then you need a consumer to turn around and say, why am I being shown this? And next thing you know, you're on investigative news reports about being grossly inappropriate and stuff. We've seen it before, so you also have to dodge that. So yes, we're overtly cautious because of the FDA and because of our brands, but someone's going to protect you in the long run as well.
Is the nature of this, I mean, it's interesting because in technology and advertising as a whole today, privacy is obviously a big concern. It's constantly talked about. When we talk about pharma, we're talking about like privacy plus.
Yep.
Is it better to have that as the mantra to go through, as opposed to, are you better for your other clients because of that?
You can have that mantra, you can have it. The key and thing to remember though is if you're going to get fancy and cutting edge, make sure that individual is the individual you're trying to meet, that qualified individual, and don't make it a proactive media necessarily. Make it a reactive media scenario so that you can actually hunt them down. If I've watched 3 videos in a row about gastritis, then the 4th video, I could probably roll that ad back. You could start making sure that that in session is actually that still engaged consumer, rather than my wife coming over to look at the computer afterwards.
I got it. You're talking about some specific targeting as opposed to hunt them down was probably not what you were going for there. But yeah.
Tell us who you are. My name is Ellen Bollinger, and I work for Mother Jones and some other media organizations. And when we're trying to appeal to people like you, we're telling a qualitative story as much as relying on the big data about the audience. Do you, when you're buying direct, look at the trust or loyalty that a community has to the site they're on, or is it really just all analytics and data?
It's honestly, before we sort of made that switch 4 years ago, it was much more qualitative. But with all the new media, all the new things we're trying, it has been much more quantitative. So seeing those numbers come in are what is giving us the evidence to go to senior management and say, hey, you know, we've never done this before, but it's actually working, you know, like, and we can point to the numbers and say so. And I think until we get a firmer footing in just believing that it will work instead of having to really prove everything to get every single dollar, I think it's going to be a lot more of that, more quantitative.
But are any of you buying direct from from the major sort of health-related sites like the WebMDs of the world, and are you convinced that those contexts really matter?
I mean, with the pre-roll ads, we have plenty of distribution networks, so we do. But again, it's hard to tie that conversion back. You know, it's more brand level or instilling that faith in people. So we do, and we know that we have a directional idea that it is working. So you know, as long as it's continuing to work, and we still see positive metrics coming from it, we're going to continue down that road, I think.
I guess this is open to all you guys, which is, as we go forward here, what's on your wish list? What do you think is what's the home run? What is the great opportunity that you see sitting out there?
Well, for me, it's moving to the next level for me. So we've done some pretty traditional grassroots kind of HCP marketing, digital marketing, et cetera. It's really now starting to tap into that patient journey I spoke of earlier with CRM type activities and really capturing those patients very early in their journey and being able to walk with them all the way through the journey to the end. And that's, we think that is the next big step for us.
I mean, I believe the next big opportunity already exists. It's a matter of us accessing it. And the greatest thing we ever run into is a tying in of traditional and digital media together to really pinpoint an individual, to really say, all right, Steve, we're following you. We know what you've been to the doctor. Yes, we're going to be big brother, but that's the reality of it. And to start start engaging with a person the entire way through it, all the way from that initial radio commercial that we tracked back to your Android system within your car, onto a Google search, onto a YouTube, onto a Bing, and following them more thoroughly through. So we actually tie that. That capability still exists and already exists. It is incredibly expensive because there's not enough vendors that go into it. But we do believe that's there. As more vendors start taking on that capability, the price comes down, it's more reachable for everyone out there.
Exactly.
For us, I think it's more honing our content and how we deliver it. So as I said before, sort of holding people's hands down the sales funnel. You know, we'll send them, we'll do email nurture campaigns. We'll try to give them blog articles that sort of address those issues, those concerns that they have in their mind about how to have that conversation, or the finances about moving to assisted living and selling your house, or stuff like that. So you know, it's trial and error, because you'll send you'll insert some content, and it'll seem to do really well, and other stuff just falls flat on its face. So I think we're just over time honing and sort of sharpening the sword, if you will, to just be more efficient.
We have a couple of questions
over here.
I'm throwing in my 2 cents into what I think the big opportunity is. I think that if pharma as a whole, arguably the biggest challenge that they face every day comes in clinical trials and recruiting people for them. And with this era of all this data and all this advanced targeting, there's a mechanism with which we can do this smartly, with which to use mobile and digital as a mechanism to start recruiting people for these trials that could help expedite drugs to market, as well as significantly lower the cost of developing the drugs themselves. over there.
That was actually one of my questions. My name is Deepak. I work at Bristol Myers Squibb. So the question is, what is your experience with marketing in clinical trials? Because they are hard to recruit without incentivizing the patient or the healthcare professional.
So I've marketed for that and received the ads for it. It's fairly straightforward. Honestly, I see this frequently overcomplicated. It's always a reactive, never a proactive media scenario. And it's always bid on the high-level conditions. So I'm lactose intolerant. So I search for research about lactose intolerance. The second or third ad I'll see is in regards to a clinical trial that I can sign up for, and it's going to be hyper-targeted to my geo area, so I'm not going to have to do a long drive. We see that in Facebook when I go and join the lactose intolerance group looking for different recipes and stuff. And it's just this type of behavioral targeting. Whenever I look for a recruitment-based scenario, it has to be reactive media because it tells us right away what we really need to focus on. And then as we start getting that inbound data, we start looking at who's really coming to engage with us, and then we refine our targeting and our dollar amount.
Yep. The challenge you end up running into also is the stringency of what the FDA is willing to accept on the far side. So it's not just that you're lactose intolerant. That ends up being the top of the funnel. They want you're lactose intolerant, you're over the age of 35, you're male, you live in the Midwest, you play on turf at night in a dome. And they really want all these combinations of things, which makes it much harder. But we have so much data, and we have so much better mechanisms now with which to target specific individuals, specifically on mobile, because very few people share mobile devices. It's an opportunity where we can get down to that 1-to-1 ratio. I think there's tremendous possibilities. It's a matter of putting the pieces together smarter.
One more question over here.
Beatriz Mallory, Census Health, thank you very much. Nikzad, you mentioned in passing that you had, quote, middling success, unquote, with geofencing. Can you elaborate?
We have a few communities in Florida testing it out, and they're working with local news channels. So somebody will call them and say, hey, we can do XYZ for you. It'll be great. And the salesperson, well, a lot of times at the community levels, people have more of a nursing background, so they're not well versed in digital. Nor do they necessarily need to be. It's a very personal thing. So as long as you can have a genuine interaction with another human being, a lot of times, it's enough. So when I say middling, I say what I mean is conceptually, I think it has a lot of power. We haven't really gotten there yet, and I think part of it is we just haven't taken or looked at it as a sort of a portfolio-wide approach. It's just been here and there in smaller markets. So hopefully, it's something that we can work into our plans for 2019. But it's difficult to do that without having the quantitative results to show that it is something that will definitely be efficient for us.
Jordan, panel, thanks very much for getting us off to a great start.